The move to the quiet tree-lined cul-de-sac of Whispering Pines was supposed to be the final bell in the hardest fight of Marcus Hale's life. After 12 years in the professional boxing ring, a career built on iron discipline and the ability to weather any storm, Marcus had retired to be the man his 7-year-old son, Leo, needed. Ever since the car accident that took Marcus's wife a year prior, the world had felt fragile. He wanted a neighborhood where the only thing he had to worry about was Leo's science project or the squeak of a swing set. But Whispering Pines wasn't a neighborhood, it was a fortress of conformity, and its gatekeeper was a woman named Karen Whitmore. The first violation arrived 48 hours after Marcus moved in. Violation Notice, Section 9.4, Unprofessional Appearance. Your heavy bag, mounted in the garage, is visible when the door is open. This constitutes a commercial aesthetic inconsistent with residential values. Marcus, a man who spoke in measured tones and moved with the grace of a middleweight, didn't argue. He moved the bag. But the notices didn't stop. They became a daily ritual of harassment. Fines for the aggressive tread on his tires, fines for the excessive sound of a jump rope on his driveway, and fines for Leo's chalk drawings on the sidewalk. The delivery man for these notices was Evan Krill, the HOA's director of compliance. Krill was a man who looked like he had spent his life being overlooked and was now making up for it with a clipboard and a god complex. But it wasn't just the fines. It was the way Krill looked at Leo. He's a bit rambunctious, isn't he, Marcus? Krill had said one afternoon, leaning against the fence while Leo played with a toy truck. A single father, retired from a violent sport. One wonders if the supervision is truly adequate. We have very strict safety and welfare protocols here. One wrong move, and the state gets involved. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest, the familiar fire of the ring, but he quenched it. My son is fine, Evan. Stay away from my boy. The final warning. Marcus filed formal complaints with the board, but they were met with a wall of silence. Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, finally granted him a meeting. She sat in her pristine office, her hands folded over a folder thick with Marcus's supposed infractions. We aren't a gym, Mr. Hale, Karen said, her voice dripping with artificial concern. And we aren't a halfway house for people who don't understand the nuances of suburban decorum. You've paid the fines, which is an admission of guilt. Now, we're issuing a final notice of disassociation. We want you to sell. I own this house, Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. I'm not going anywhere. Rules have a way of enforcing themselves, Karen replied. People who don't belong eventually find the environment inhospitable. The fire and the fury. 2 days later, the inhospitable became homicidal. Marcus had run to the corner store for a carton of milk, leaving Leo in the SUV for what was meant to be a 90-second trip. When he stepped out of the store, he didn't see the quiet street. He saw a plume of black, oily smoke rising from his driveway. He sprinted. His heart, the heart of a champion, pounded against his ribs as he turned the corner. His SUV was a wall of orange flame. The fire was concentrated around the fuel tank and the passenger door. And through the smoke he heard it, Leo's muffled, terrified scream. Standing 10 feet away, silhouetted by the inferno, was Evan Krill. He was holding a red plastic gas can, his face illuminated by the dancing fire. He wasn't running for water. He wasn't calling 911. He was just watching. I told you, Marcus, Krill shouted over the roar of the fire. Rules are there for a reason. You should have followed the rules. Marcus didn't think. He didn't feel the heat that singed the hair off his arms. He dived into the smoke. The door handle was white-hot, searing the skin of his palms, but he didn't let go. He ripped the door off its hinges with a roar of pure, primal adrenaline. He lunged into the melting interior, shielding Leo's small body with his own as the upholstery turned to liquid fire. He hauled his son out, rolling across the asphalt as the SUV's windows shattered in the heat. Leo was shaking, covered in soot but alive. Marcus handed the boy to a neighbor who had rushed out, screaming for help. Then, Marcus Hale turned around. The boxer was gone. The father remained. Krill was still standing there, a look of twisted triumph on his face that quickly curdled into terror as Marcus approached. You burned my son, Marcus whispered. Krill tried to swing the heavy gas can, but Marcus was a shadow. He moved inside the arc, his fists, the tools of his former trade, becoming instruments of absolute justice. The first strike broke Krill's jaw. The second shattered his ribs. The third sent him into the pavement with the force of a falling building. Neighbors recorded the incident, but no one moved to stop Marcus until Krill lay motionless, the gas can rolling into the gutter. The paper trail of blood. The arrival of the authorities was a whirlwind of sirens and flashing lights. While Leo was rushed to the pediatric burn unit, The police took Marcus into custody, not as a criminal, but as a witness to an attempted mass murder. The investigation was swift. The fire marshal found the accelerant trail immediately. But the real breakthrough came 4 days later when the FBI, alerted by the severity of the civil rights violation, raided Evan Krill's home. In his basement, they found a shrine to the Whispering Pines HOA. They found a digital hit list, managed by Karen Whitmore. The evidence was undeniable. There were recorded phone calls from Karen to Krill: "He's not leaving, Evan. The fines didn't work. We need a catastrophic event to clear the property. Make sure it looks like a mechanical failure. Make sure he knows why it's happening." There were photos of Leo at the park, photos of Marcus's gym schedule, and a signed contract promising Krill a bonus from the HOA's contingency fund once Marcus's property was foreclosed upon. The judgment. The trial of Karen Whitmore and Evan Krill became a national symbol of the dangers of unchecked microauthority. Evan Krill, having suffered permanent brain damage from Marcus's defensive strikes, he remained in a vegetative state. Regardless, the court sentenced him to life in prison for attempted murder of a minor, aggravated arson, and terroristic threats. He would serve his sentence in a medical prison facility. Karen Whitmore, the queen of Whispering Pines, was stripped of her finery. She was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and child endangerment. The judge, citing her sociopathic disregard for human life in the pursuit of property aesthetics, sentenced her to 45 years in state prison. The Whispering Pines HOA was dismantled by a court-appointed liquidator. Every cent of the association's assets was seized to pay for Leo's medical treatments and psychological therapy. Marcus Hale stood on the sidewalk of a new neighborhood 6 months later. His hands were scarred, thick pink tissue that would always remind him of the day he pulled his son from the fire. The district attorney had declined all charges against Marcus, ruling that his response was a natural and lawful defense of a child against an active and lethal threat. Leo sat on the porch of their new home, playing with a toy truck. He was quieter than he used to be, and he didn't like the sound of sirens, but he was safe. Marcus looked down the street. There were no compliance officers. There were no tactical vests. There was just a neighbor waving as he mowed his lawn, and a dog barking at a squirrel. The fight was over. For the first time in his life, Marcus Hale didn't have to put up his guard. He sat down on the porch steps next to his son, took a deep breath of the cool evening air, and finally truly came home.